This is the Garden of English. I'm Tim Freitas, and today you're not going to be hearing from me except for right now, because the video that you're about to see is my friend Kristian from Teachers Teaching Teachers How to Teach Writing, talking about all of the ways that he alternatively grades to speed up the grading process, to still give kids meaningful feedback, and then actually be able to enjoy those nice days when the sun is actually out. So you're going to want to check out what he has to say.
All right. So hello, everyone. I'm Kristian Kuhn, and I'm from Rochester, New York. And guess what? Today is going to be 70 degrees and sunny. So it looks like winter has finally lost its hold on us. Like yesterday was the first real day of spring. And I want to tell you this before we launch into the gist of what we're going to talk about today. I do not want to grade at all today because it's beautiful. And I have a cat, and you're going to probably see him walk across the screen and beg me. He likes to go walking on a leash. And I promised him that as soon as we were done, I would walk him on the leash. So imagine I could grade papers or deny that cat. And the cat does not want to be denied. He's very persistent. So by the time we are done with the workshop in about 50 minutes, you will have 5 to 6 alternative ways to grade essays. What I need to do, though, in order to front load that, though, is very briefly, and I'll be quick about it, but it's essential that you have some fundamental knowledge of it, how my templates and heuristics work, because my contention is that if you're going to alternative grade, you have to have some template or heuristic that you're working with. And if you don't, you can't hone in your focus and get tunnel vision on particular things. You'll be grading globally, and that's where you're going to run into problems because you won't be able to isolate particular traits of writing, your comments will have to encompass just about everything. So let me queue up my presentation and we'll launch in. Can you guys see that? Jake, is that clear? Thumbs up? Yeah, all right, good. So yeah, we'll be talking about grading methods. So as you guys know, I run a master class in addition to teaching full time, and it's called Teaching Teachers How to Teach Writing. So what we've learned statistically is that 91% of secondary teachers, ELA teachers, were never taught how to teach writing in their practicums. So ultimately what happens, on that first day of our career, we're hurled into the classroom and we're kind of left to our own devices to figure it out. So by default, we fall into these traditional methods of pedagogy, and one in particular is our grading practices. And if you think about this, these grading practices have been in existence since the one-room schoolhouse, and grading practices really have not evolved over time at all. And further, traditional grading methods, I feel, and you probably feel too at this point in your careers, that they're kind of ineffective. We don't see a lot of growth and maturation in our student writers over the course of an academic year. We pull our hair and say, Samantha's making the same dang mistake in this essay as she did in the last essay. What's going on? And there's a disconnect between the comments we put down in the margins, the summary of the grade, and then the transference into growth and maturation in writing. So there's a serious disconnect there. So my alternative grading methods, I've been using them for years now, and I've taught hundreds of teachers my methods. They all say, wow, I'm witnessing great progress in my students, and their writing's becoming much more crisp, much more fluid. It's got better textual support, better textual analysis, and I'm doing far less work. The onus is on the student, which is where it should be. My contention is this: Whenever teachers are doing more work than the students, we're doing it wrong. And with traditional grading practices, we're doing 99% of the work. If you think about it, the only thing that the students need to do is read our comments, look at the grade and say, yeah, I got an A, or, oh, Mrs. Hill, she's a jerk. She doesn't like me. She gave me a C, right? So sometimes it becomes personal if we grade them, honestly and accurately. It becomes a personal assault on them. Or they're like, dude, I don't care. All I need is a 65 to pass anyways, right? So the burden is on us. We're doing 99.9% of the work, and it consumes our evenings and weekends, and it need not. So the other thing, as I already said, students really don't make significant progress in traditional methods. And lastly, students need to do the heavy lifting. I feel that it's the inverse. Students need to be doing 90% of the heavy lifting. Teachers do 10%. So today, at the end of this workshop, you'll see how you can invert that paradigm so that you can walk away and have a little peace of mind and some more free time. To speak about other aspects of my teaching, like when I host Socratic seminars or fish bowls or Harkness discussions, my goal is to say nothing in those conversations. If the students can run and facilitate those conversations without me chiming in, I consider it to be a huge success. The more I insert myself, the less learning is occurring. So students need to generate on their own. So here's what I need to do. I need to very briefly talk about what I call my Nuance Academy. And I teach in quarters, so there's 10-week quarters to my academic year. And in the master class, I teach this as well, but with my particular students, the first 10 weeks is my Nuance Academy. And we do everything from grammar, punctuation, syntax, rhythm, voice, flow. And then we have an intensive word study academy. So I want to show you just a couple of things that are embedded in that Nuance Academy, so that when you look at my rubrics for my alternative grading methods, you have a sense of what I'm looking at when I grade their papers. So I have a book that I use. It's free online, and you can jot this down if you want. All the texts that I use are free, just because our district has some money, but not a lot. For me to monopolize it for my instruction. So everything I use is free. So if you go into Google and just type in Write It Right by Strunk and White, you can get this for free, and then just post it in your Google Classroom. Back in the day, like I'm a 90s child, so I graduated high school in 94. We used the Elements of Style, and I remember Mr. Bernstein, Mr. Liparulo, and Mr. Paul had that in their back pocket all the time. And you could hit a kid back then, and if you made mistakes with your grammar and punctuation, you'd get whacked with Elements of Style until you learned how to punctuate correctly. And kids back in the 90s, like, we grasped this concept and we really didn't make a lot of mistakes. So in my Nuance Academy, right before the very first essay that I assign, I do certain assignments. So rule number 3 is commas, right? And when we read essays, we're like, oh God, could you write something that is not a comma splice, please? And oftentimes when I push into districts and work with teachers within English departments, and I read papers, I'm like, are you going to hold this kid accountable to 38 comma splices? And teachers are like, oh yeah, I didn't really say anything about that. And I'm like, you're going to get it over and over and over again. Then you have to have an exercise. It's not enough to tell the student; they need to do an exercise to fix it. So early in the academic year, for a homework assignment, I'll say, all right, guys, read rule number 3, and then write me 10 original sentences where you properly use commas. If I do that exercise 5 times, so 50 sentences for comma, most likely out of 100 students, like 98 of them will not, well, I say never, they will seldom make comma mistakes in their writing if they do that 5 times. Same goes for semicolon, hyphen, dash, colon, 10 sentences, original sentences per syntactical device, and they've mastered it. You never have to do it again. So I know that when teachers grade papers, sometimes we treat it as if it's the first draft of the Magna Carta, and we get into being, red ink hawks, and we're all over making editorial comments and stuff with punctuation. It can be taught, and it can be taught in a way that's so effective you never have to teach it again. So at the end of my academic year, I really don't have too many students that are making punctuation or syntactical mistakes. The other thing in terms of voice, rhythm, and flow, we tend to make a lot of observations about this, like, oh my goodness, could this kid hit me with something besides the short, simple declarative sentence? Their essays read chop, 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 right? Because they don't know how to manipulate their sentence constructs. So Strunk and White have something called rule number 18. And in it, they take one loose sentence and rewrite it 12 different ways. And then they name the sentence. My students, even like 9th graders, need to know this. So like 9th graders will know what an independent clause is, an adverb clause, an infinitive, a parenthetical statement. That way I have a common language with them when I'm commenting on their papers. So I was doing a stack of papers yesterday using one of my alternative methods, and a student had 3 consecutive short, simple declarative sentences. And I said, Jason, take 2 and 3 and make it a parenthetical statement. And he did it. He knew what I was talking about. And then he understood the effectiveness of why I made that suggestion. So you need a common discourse. You need to be sharing the same diction with your students so that you can get into these nuanced things. So one of the things I do, and in my master class, we have a library, and it has like over 150 of these like quasi Bob Ross videos. If you remember the manner in which Bob Ross taught, each episode of The Joy of Painting was 22 minutes long. So I have 150 videos in there, and a number of them are nuanced games. So I play a lot of games with my students, and students love to be competitive against each other. This is something that I learned early in my career. If you get your students competing against each other, man, oh man, are they cutthroat. And then they're competing about compositional nuance. It's really cool. So we play this game, Hollywood Squares, where I split the class in half. Half the class is an X, half the class is an O, and we work on revision. So look at how this flows here. I have many flaws. One is that I judge people. People who push their cart slowly at Wegmans bug me. I also can't stand old people who write checks. I'm pretty judgmental. So each one's a short, simple declarative sentence. And the goal is to rewrite that, manipulating the 12 sentence constructs that Strunk and White teach. And this is a way to teach voice, rhythm, and flow. So we do these exercises a lot early in the academic year, and then I back away. After I teach it a few times, I don't need to do it anymore. So here's one more just as another example. I like to use flashcards to study for tests. I study a lot. This is why I get good grades. I make flashcards before every test. It really works for me. So when my students construct a sentence, I can say to them, what kind of sentence construct is that? And they could say, it's an infinitive, it's a parenthetical statement. So I need them to have that language. So here's another thing that we talk about in the Nuance Academy, and I'm only presenting to you a few things. This is chock full in the master class, but students need these things in order to become real, girthy writers. We want them to have some pizzazz when they write. So to be verbs. So oftentimes students overuse to be verbs. And I noticed that a lot of teachers don't comment about this when they're looking at student drafts. So the to be verbs create passive voice, but it just yields like low vocab. And if students completely overuse to be, you're going to get a lot of short, simple declarative sentences, and you're going to get that chop, chop, chop feeling to it, flow to it. So was, were, am, is, been, be, being, are. So we do a lot of exercises with them like this. And I do a lot of games. So look at this sentence here. Soccer will never be a prominent sport in the US because it is a game of finesse and isn't a sport that is excessively violent. So you have be, is, isn't, and is. You got 4 in there. Tell the student to revise, and they might do something like this. Due to its lack of excessive violence, soccer will never become a prominent sport in the US. Americans prefer games like football and MMA, which lack the finesse of soccer. So the vocab goes up. So I call that tier 2 level vocabulary, like your average run-of-the-mill SAT level word. And the sentence constructs change. Better flow, rhythm, voice, just by focusing on those to be's. Here's one more. The Beatles used to be my favorite band, but now I'm giving modern groups a chance because I've been being more open-minded. So you have be, am, been, and being. Again, 4, revise it. In the past, comma, I pretty much only listened to the Beatles, comma, but lately more modern groups and musicians have found their way into my rotation. Much more crisp, much more dynamic, simply by focusing on those to be's. So you'll see in my rubric in just a second for the alternative grading methods that we focus on like that element of nuance. So there are, like 50 things in terms of theory and technique that students need to be well versed in to make the alternatives work. And again, we totally go over that in the master class. The other thing that we tend to dog our students for is vocab. And I always contend with my students that they know far more than they think they know. So we do a lot of word retrieval exercises as pre-writing exercises before they write. So I'll give them a sentence like this and I'll say, just yell it out. Just yell out the best tier 2 level words you have. Ava took off her soiled sock and the stench was so, and they might be like, bad. No. Tier 2, rancid, pungent, repugnant, putrid, like good language. And they know these words, like deep in the recesses of their brain, they have it. She had the blank to ask for a raise after 3 months of dreadful performance. The audacity, the moxie, the gumption, right? So they know these words. So it's an I tell them they got to exercise the pause. Oftentimes kids sit down to their keyboard or their white blank sheet of paper and they just crank and they're not thinking, they're not being metacognitive about what they're writing. So it's an exercise in metacognition, thinking about your thinking. So what I want to do next is show you a couple of the not a couple. I only have 2. 2 of the heuristics I use that I've invented that my students employ when they write their introductions and their body paragraphs. I'm going to be super quick in this because I know you guys want to get to the alternative grading, but I need to give you a brief overview of this so that my alternative methods make sense. As I said earlier, the alternative grading methods work best if you're using a heuristic or a template. It doesn't necessarily need to be mine, but something for them to scaffold their writing and to house their writing is really paramount in order for you to speed grade. So here's what I tell teachers when I push into districts and work with departments. Oftentimes I'll read a teacher's prompt and say, uh-oh, the way you worded your prompt, you're going to get a book report, you're going to get plot synopsis, or you're going to get something that reads like a Cliff Note summary. And oftentimes we read papers and we say, oh my God, why is there so much plot summary? It's not the kid's fault. It's our fault for the way that we worded our prompt. So here's a guaranteed way to ensure that your prompts are going to yield literary analysis. So you have to have implicit in your prompt, and the College Board does a wonderful job of this in Lang and Lit. You have two questions that need to be embedded in the prompt. What is the authorial intent, and how does the author construct meaning? So I say that there are only two ways to properly write an introductory paragraph: to declare or invert. Every single time a student writes literary analysis, they're going to invert. And again, these you can use these across the expository modes. Every time a student writes rhetorical analysis, they're going to declare. For synthesis, it's 50-50. Argument, it's 50-50. Research is 50-50. But they need to know these two. As we're using scaffolds early in the academic year, I tell my students that I want their introductions to be 4 sentences long, no more, no less. Because as you know in your careers, if you don't give your students parameters, you're going to get the 14-sentence introduction, you're going to get the 7-sentence introduction, you're going to get the 2-sentence introduction. So it's either too much or too little. 4 is perfect to house everything they need to say. So what I'm going to do is answer the first question: what is the authorial intent? And as I funnel it down towards that 4th sentence, I'm going to answer the question, how does the author construct meaning? So I wanted to choose writing samples that are kind of smack dab in the middle of our of the breadth of our learners. So these are samples from my 10 honor students. So I know some of you do 8th and 9th graders, some of you do AP. So this is like right in the middle, all right? And then I'll show you what my 11th graders are doing. So start with the question, what is the authorial intent? So it's going to be a heavy thematic focus. And again, this is for A Raisin in the Sun. Dreams know a secret truth that most humans tend to overlook. Moments of pain are opportunities for growth. It is the nature of some dreams to get crushed, but what fate ushers in is an even better version of the original dream. While all of the principal characters in the play have their dreams deferred, what they end up with is a much better thing: the unconditional love of family. Now, my last sentence, I'm going to answer the question, what or how does the author construct meaning? And this is where you're going to use your literary terms and devices to ensure that you're performing literary analysis and meeting the demands of the assignment. Hansberry conveys this theme through the symbol of Mama's plant and the motif of the home. So you can see that's perfectly executed as far as an inverted thesis goes. Oops, I went too far. Here's one more doing the exact same thing using the exact same template. So students can use this across expository modes. Racism is a blight upon our history, a destructive force that threatens our future, and a toxin that prevents many from actualizing a present. But to bring about change, one must not be afraid to take the first steps toward justice and equity. So heavy focus on theme. Several of the principal characters in the play have to confront society's constraints in order to manifest their dreams. Hansberry illustrates this theme through the symbol of Benita's hair and the centralized setting of the younger's home. So last sentence, answer the question, how does the author construct meaning? I'll show you one more. It has been said that home is where you are loved the most and act the worst. This is true of the principal characters of the play in that they show the worst sides of their personalities in front of each other within the home structure. No one can choose the family they are born into, but we can choose how our families come to be born within ourselves. So each student is taking a different theme, a different thematic concept from the play. Last sentence, answer the exact same question. How does the author construct meaning? Hansberry emphasizes the importance of the family unit through the symbol of mama's plant and the setting of the younger's home. So you guys that teach lit, this is perfect for Q1 and Q2. You guys that do Lang, this for rhetorical analysis, you flip it. You start with your rhetorical terms and devices, and I won't show you that today. I don't have time, and it's not really the point of what we're doing. But just so that you know, if you're going to grade a stack of rhetorical analyses, that's kind of the process you go, and it's what the College Board looks for, and it's what they favor in terms of their 5s and 6s. So here are a couple of juniors writing about Gatsby. Sometimes teachers don't want the lit terms front-loaded in the introductory paragraph. And I agree, sometimes it's not appropriate given the prompt. And therefore, the only question you're going to answer is, what is the authorial intent? Do it in 4 sentences, focus on the sentence constructs, focus on the academic diction, and you'll get something like this. I got to move our pictures out of the way. There's a stark distance between the American dream and the reality of America. We tell ourselves that if we buckle down and strap up our bootlaces, we can elevate to the heights of any dream, but this isn't necessarily true in our country. The fact of the matter is that some are born into the dream, and for the rest of us, we will never bust through the glass ceiling to enter into those promises. Despite his seeming rags to riches tale, Gatsby's no exception to this rule. So you see, the thesis is always last when you write literary analysis. So just boom, in the 4th sentence, just drop the thesis. 4 sentences every time. I'll give you one more. Whether we like it or not, America is not without its caste system. It stands to reason that if one is born into wealth, they will find themselves saddled with wealth later on in life. And on the flip side, those born into poverty tend to stay there. There isn't much social mobility in our country. The idea of the American dream is a fairy tale we tell ourselves, and as is clear in the character of Gatsby, it's a dream whose bubble has been burst long ago. So let's go back to what I first started with. You saw 5 introductions. Do you see how my students are wielding complex sentences? They're punctuated correctly. The vocab is up there. So all of that needs to be taught and can be taught if you're doing nuance academies and word academies within your instructional practices. So those are all really good. And you know, this is just a junior. I'm in New York State, so general ed is Regents. It's just a Regents kid. You know, not an AP kid, and they're writing at AP college levels because of these templates and heuristics. So any questions you have, put them in the chat. Jake is going to feed me any of your questions. So as I move on to the body paragraphs, feel free to ask away. And then I have one more thing to show you in terms of a template or a heuristic, and then we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of how do I grade these essays. So I need to show you a couple of essays, obviously, before I grade them. So the question next is, in terms of templates and heuristics, how do I construct the body paragraphs? And I use something called the Syllogistic Method. It comes from Aristotle. He ran a school called the Lyceum, and the rich aristocratic boys would go there to learn polemics, oration, debate, and then the maths and sciences, of course. But for oration, they would have these intense word wrangling events. So maybe you've read Plato's Republic before, where the question is, what is justice? And then characters chime in and they offer their syllogisms to try to come up with a definitive definition of what justice is. And all a syllogism is when we argue from premise to conclusion. So if I were to say premise 1, arsenic is deadly. Premise 2, my dog ate arsenic. Conclusion, my dog is going to die. You can see there's a word for that. It's called cogency. You want to be bulletproof with your logic. When we read essays from our students, if we're not using heuristics and templates, I'll be willing to bet that a lot of you are only seeing your students offer the second premise. And that's why you read them and say, oh my goodness, this is so plot heavy. Given their natural intuitive instincts, students love to write plot. It's what they're most comfortable with. It's just where their minds go. So they're not offering a first premise at all. And it's essential that they do that. So here's another one, like any 38-year-old or older non-felon born in the US can run for the presidency. James is 42, born in Rhode Island, non-felon. Conclusion, James can run for the presidency. When our students write, we want them to be that logical and that locked in. You need sort of a tunnel vision from start to finish in order to be cogent in writing. So if a student falters in their writing, it's usually because their logic is off. So in terms of literary analysis, this is what the syllogism looks like. You're going to make an argument with a literary focus in the first premise. The second premise is going to be your textual support. And I always tell my students, have a teeter-totter balance between your quoting and paraphrasing. And the conclusion is the textual analysis and the links. And by links, I mean this. The first premise is a promise. I promised you, dear reader, that I would argue certain things. So it's where you're dropping the gavel and saying, here's my point. I'm hammering it home. I've made my argument. And then you hear echoes of the thesis statement. So students, of course, ask, introduction's 4 sentences long. How long's a syllogistic body paragraph? And I say, shoot for 10 sentences because you need ample support and analysis. So those little 5 sentence body paragraphs that our students write, they're not enough. They just don't advance the argument far enough, and there's no proof in the pudding for them to have a leg to stand on. So I cap it. I say, don't go more than 12. Otherwise you're on a bird walk and probably getting plot heavy. So roughly around that 10 mark. So look at this. In terms of a template, I tell my students, take 3 sentences to set up your argument. Okay. Your argument must be central. The College Board says that for the synthesis paper in language. I say it for every expository mode. Your argument must be central. So I say take 3 sentences and make your literary argument. So this is where they want to be using their terms and devices. So look at what this student did. Mama's feeble plant, here's the word, symbolizes her family's deferred dreams for a better future, which struggled to survive and take root in Chicago's South Side in an era of deep racial divide. Her endless devotion to her small houseplant signifies her constant care for her family and her attention to its dreams. While every principal character witnesses a radical revision of their initial dream, the plant struggles to stay alive, as is juxtaposed to the struggling survival of the individual dreams and family unit. So what happens, and I see this in my master class when I'm working with teachers and when I push into districts and departments, students are forgetting that, or they have not been taught how to do that. That's essential to literary analysis. To meet the demands of literary analysis, you need a first premise. Some teachers talk about it as a topic sentence or a claim, and students try to do it in one sentence. It doesn't work because then their textual support is coming too soon and it gets plot heavy. You got to hold off on the textual support until about the 4th sentence. So now we're at the second premise. And you got to get into the text, teeter-totter balance the quoting and the paraphrasing. Growing doggedly in a small pot by the apartment's kitchen window, Mama's plant has spirit despite the fact that this little old plant ain't never had enough sunshine or anything. So you'll notice that my students have really smooth quote transitions, and there's a template for that. I call it the 5-word rule. If a student places a minimum, so a minimum of 5 words in front of the quote, and keeps the quote small, it should sound conversational. So oftentimes students will place a period, come with their dump truck and just drop a quote right after the period. So you don't want that. You have to be smooth with your embedding. In conjunction with this symbol, the youngers have struggled to overcome their hardships and setbacks, such as racial prejudice that thwart their growth and social mobility. Mama dreams of owning a house with a small garden, and until the play's conclusion, her plant is as close as she ever got to achieving that dream. In the final moments of the play, Mama picks up her plant and leaves the Southside apartment for the last time, showing that this symbol of perseverance will accompany the family as it faces new challenges in Claiborne Park. So I want to point something out. Do you see how disciplined this writer is? The promise of the first premise is to talk about the symbol of the plant. All the quotes and all the paraphrasing has to do with the symbol of the plant. So they're really locked in right now. It's cogent, right? So they need a little bit more support and analysis, though. You got to go more than one quote. We further see this idea at play when gruffly Mama very happily tells Walter to leave her alone while she tends to her plant. Walter's persistent pursuit of his father's life insurance money pulls the family apart and disappoints the sentiments of his mother. In stark contrast, which brings about a resolution to the central conflict, Walter sweetly, I lost my place here, sweetly and playfully begins to sing, and Ruth brings Mama the package that Walter had purchased. This is a moment of reconciliation, a cue that the family has remedied their divide and that they plan to go ahead with Mama's dream of keeping the family united. The gardening tool symbolized the resolution as to what is going to happen to the family's dreams. So I have a lot of support and analysis there. Now I'm at the conclusion of the syllogism. Tie it back to the first premise, echo the thesis. So it's the little bow that you put on the package. Usually takes 2 sentences, 3 sentences tops. As we see, the biggest dream of any family is their survival and need to flourish and grow together as a united front. Mama's unwavering devotion to both her plant and family indicate that this dream is going to come true. In the end, all the stuff of dreams is rendered mute. It's the dream of staying together as one being that truly matters. So that is perfectly locked in, right? That's what I want to see my students do when they write, is be that logical, that rational, that well-reasoned. So those are my templates of the inverted thesis, declarative thesis, and syllogistic method. Now I want to show you how I grade these papers, given that my students are writing with templates. But first, I'll have Jake check the chat box and see if
timing. Yes, Natalie asked the question, is it appropriate to use the first person in an academic essay?
I say yes. And here's my reason why. The College Board is wildly contradictory on this. And I did a workshop last Wednesday with Tim Freitas, who runs the Garden of English, and he's kind of the voice of the College Board. He's the one that wrote the College Board textbook. And he was like, you really should avoid it. And I said, if you look at the College Board sample papers, the kids that are getting the 5s and the 6s do this. It's one of the ways to ensure your voice. And in composition, you want to be an academic self, but you want to be a self. So I tell my students to be conversational when they write. I teach Lang and Lit, and in order to get the pizzazz point, right, the voice point, you have to have a balance between the colloquial, the vernacular, and the academic. That needs to teeter-totter. So one way my students do that is with sentences like this. As we see, right, you can't do it a lot, but every now and then it's totally fine. It's one of those rules that seems rather arbitrary for me because we don't talk that way. And everything that I do goes back to Aristotle. So the roots of oration and polemics. Aristotle said you have to do that in oration. So I'm like, hey, if Aristotle said it, I'm following the big guns. I allow my students to do it. Ultimately, as they prepare for the exams, I'm like, some of your readers won't appreciate it. So if you can get away from doing it, probably a good idea. But for my class, I invite you to do it. I teach at a private college here in Rochester, Nazareth College, and my peers in the department, we ask our students to do this in their writing. I used to teach at Monroe Community College, and it was like a 50-50 split in the department. We had a lot of traditionalists that didn't like to see it, but it's becoming increasingly more common as a practice in composition. And I think in the next 5 years or so, we're going to revise this this kind of unspoken rule. Is there anything else, Jake?
No, that's the only, the one thing I just sort of reiterating what you're saying. It's interesting because I feel like I've softened on that too. I think where I try to stop students is where they're adding additional language. It's not necessarily like I believe when
Yes.
there's a premise there already that's understood that, but that, as we see, or I've moved away from being sort of that stuffy as the reader can understand or something. It's like as we see, or something that's a little more human. I think
I
that's
do not like I statements. I do not have them say I. I think that's pretty clumsy and elementary. So some of my ninth graders will do it, and the struggling and emerging students, and I allow them to get unstuck. It's kind of liberating for them to do it. But as the academic year progresses, like absolutely get away from it. But in September, October, as we're just learning how to write, I'm okay with that. All right, you guys. Oh, go ahead.
There's a few more questions actually.
Okay.
So one is, will we have access to the slides?
I think I can post them in the group. Yeah, I think I can do that. So, or I can email stuff. I'll figure it out. I work with a web designer for my master class, and they're really good with all the technology stuff. So I'll pass that question on.
And then the next question is from Brittany. How long do you think it takes students to get to this place in their writing? You scaffold and have them write singular paragraphs of literary analysis before you hit the full essay.
Do I say that again?
How long? She's asking first how long it takes them to get to this process that these exemplars are kind of showing. But do you scaffold and have them write singular paragraphs of literary analysis before you hit the full essay?
Yes. So early in the academic year, we only do 4-paragraph essays: intro, 2 bodies, conclusion. As they're learning the templates and heuristics, my next slide's very important. You have to Bob Ross your instruction. You have to paint with your students. So often when I push into districts and work with departments, there's a fundamental difference between assigning writing and teaching writing. Let me give you an analogy. Bob Ross comes onto the screen and he says, okay, happy little people, today we are going to paint a beautiful New England autumnal landscape with beautiful fall foliage. And in the middle of our canvas, we're going to include a New England wood-covered bridge. What he does is he sits there and proceeds to paint with you, and you follow. And the cool thing about Bob Ross, and not many people know this, he used one heuristic every time he painted, one template. It's called the wet on wet technique. Every single time he painted. So when I assign an essay, I quote unquote paint with my students. So I will say, all right, here's, we're doing literary analysis. So I'm going to show you 3 inverted theses, and I'm going to show you 1 declarative. And the declarative is written to show you why you don't want to declare, why you always want to invert. And then I pause and say, go ahead, write your introduction. Demystifies the process for them. They need to see exemplars and models in order to get unstuck. And I know that some teachers are very reluctant to write with their with their students. I have teachers in my master class that are like, oh my God, I'm so scared to write for my students. And I'm like, no. You're far better than they are. Trust me, trust me, trust me. You're good writers, you're English teachers. So as the academic year progresses, I model far less for them, for my AP guys. As of March 1st, I no longer play Bob Ross because they cannot take me to the exam with them. But in order to introduce these templates and heuristics, you really got to Bob Ross your instruction. Otherwise, it's not going to make sense. If you just talk about it in the ether and give graphic organizers and stuff, you're not going to see much growth and maturation in their writing. They learn best from you being the expert in the classroom. And here's the thing, my writing essays is so much less time consuming than my grading their essays. It's it's some work on the front to save time on the back. And it's really an effective practice. And it's one way to really get them to grow as writers. Anything else, Jake, before I dive into the templates? Okay, let me show you. Let me get rid of this screen. I did this exercise with my students right before the AP language exam with a rhetorical analysis essay. And it's called Writing Myself the Color of Bob Ross. I went to Walmart and I bought my students a box of 25-cent crayons. Each kid got a box of crayons. And through this grading practice, they will figure out how well they are doing with regards to their writing through the presence and the absence of color. And you'll see here, this is why you need to use heuristics. So if you wrote a declarative thesis, underline it in red. If you wrote an inverted thesis, underline it in green. Very tactful colors there. You don't want to write a literary analysis a literary analysis with a declarative thesis. So red, stop, don't do it. You want to write it inverted. Green means you're good to go, right? So here's what I did in order to make this work. They are looking at my samples. I wrote the essay twice, once perfectly, like scoring 100 on it. The second time I wrote it with a lot of the pitfalls and snafus that they fall into, just for compare contrast. I can write those essays in 20 minutes. It really takes me no time to write my own essays. I know what I'm looking for. I know what their pitfalls are, so I can crank it. So in terms of the Nuance Academy, I got some color coding for that. Maintaining an academic tone is important. Underline each tier 2 level word that you used in your essay in purple. So again, absence, presence of color, they know exactly where they stand. Put the onus on the student. Let's take a look at your rhythm and flow. As we know, overusing the short, simple declarative sentence impedes this from happening. Underline each short, simple declarative sentence in your essay in orange. And this is where you get into the conversations with the Jasons as I circle around the room and look at how they're color coding. You have 3 back-to-back short, simple declarative sentences. Take 2 and 3 and make it a parenthetical statement right now. And they do everything in Google. So he could fix it on the spot and get rid of his orange. To be verbs yield a super passive voice and also hamper your diction. Underline each to be verb that you use in your essay in black. And here's where the learning comes. Instead of having to write this in the margin 100 times, they see it on their own. If you have a lot of black, you got a lot of short, simple declarative sentences, and you don't have a lot of purple. So you got to work on the black. That's your learning target next time you write. Or if you're going to revise this essay, go through and eliminate most of the black. Like you can't totally eliminate to be verbs. It's a building block verb, but you can definitely limit it. So I have some knuckleheads that still want to write 5-sentence body paragraphs, and they wonder why, I'm giving D's and C minuses on paper. I'm the jerk. I hate them, right? Everything's personal when you give a low grade. I don't give, they earn it, but they like loathe me for assigning a low grade. So in the margins of your essay, write down how many sentences each body paragraph is. We're striving for 10, and they write down 5. And I'm like, you're getting a D. Follow the template, right? So it's discipline. I tell my students that word all the time. I'm like, my favorite word is discipline. You got to be disciplined. Take a look at your first premises, underline each in blue. In addition, as we've discussed, they should be 3 sentences long. So you got to make sure that you're front loading the body paragraph with that first premise. And then here's the kicker. For literary analysis, you need to be using literary terms and devices. Underline in green within your first premise the lit terms or devices you've used. Absence, presence of color. They're like, oh, I'm not talking about symbolism. I don't have metaphor. I don't have syntax. I don't have tone. I have nothing. I'm not talking about binaries. I got nothing in there. Okay, when you revise or the next subsequent draft, make sure you got that in there. You need to paraphrase and quote sufficiently from the text sources in order to defend and prove your thesis. Underline in yellow all instances of textual support. Absence, presence of color. So I don't need to show you this whole thing. You get the gist of it. So here's what I do. All right. That is the huge time saver. They submit their essays and I read them. And I don't even need to read the whole thing. Right. Jake and I were talking about this before everyone came on. Don't even need to read the whole thing. And in a notepad, I write down the grade the essay deserves. So the grade they deserve. So at the end of this exercise, I say, guess what, my lovelies? On this notepad, I wrote down the grade I think you deserve. In exactly 5 sentences, based on how you color-coded this essay, tell me the grade you think you deserve and why. And to cap it all off, give me 3 learning targets. What are 3 things you're going to work on in your next subsequent draft or essay? I have 78 AP language students. Oh, let me back up. So I tell them, if we're within 5 points of each other, I'll give you the higher grade. So Samantha, if you say 88 and I say 91, you're getting the 91. Okay. Out of 78 AP Lang students, I had 1 grade discrepancy. My friend Sathana, who's a grade grubber, sometimes AP students are grade grubbers, and she gave herself a 98 and I said it was an 82, so I have to have a conference with her and just say, come on, man, like, be honest, be fair. You see your color, how you color coded that. You saw my models and exemplars. Be fair, and then I get my dad put so much pressure on me to go to Stanford or UC Berkeley, and I'm not going to make it. I'm not a good writer. And I'm like, let's just work. Let's get disciplined. We can get there. But, it's looking like an 82, not a 98. So, yep.
Just because you're getting some, so this Bob Ross checklist, Jen says, is absolutely incredible. I would agree. I definitely would love a copy. And then should other students look at the essays, or is this just a self-reflection? And then same, would love a copy. Do you have kids color grade the model examples you give?
Yes, they grade mine. And they're, they love it when I write poorly, and I'm like, oh, geez, I didn't see that. Sorry, guys. Thanks for noting that. So I it's not mocking them. I'm just like, dude, my second essay rocks. I crushed it. And I read it and they're like, wait, you have no textual support. You promised to be talking about the symbol of the plant, but you're talking about the life insurance policy. It's not cogent. It's not lining up. Why did you do that? I'm like, ka-ching, you're seeing it. So That's the importance of giving them models and exemplars. So yeah, 100%. Yep.
Should students look at the wait, do you have, hold on, no, that was answered. And then the question whether or not people could get a copy of this checklist.
Yeah, I probably could. I think I'll share my masterclass website at the end. There's a whole bunch of free stuff on there, and like there's no hard sell on that. You can log in and get the free stuff. I could put it up there for free at the end here.
Another question here, Kristian, is do they do peer reviews?
Sometimes, yes. Not with this one. Sometimes they pass their papers around voluntarily if they're like, geez, I don't know, I need a second set of eyes on this. My students are very inclined to do that. But for this particular writing workshop, it's not devised for peer review, but I'm sure you could tweak it to be so. Yeah, absolutely. I think it would actually be interesting if students were to hand their paper to a peer and say, you color code it for me, you know, because I think sometimes they're so close to it. It's so close to their face. They don't see things sometimes, but they're brutally honest. So as I was saying, 78 AP Lang students, 77 were spot on. We were within 5 points of each other, and I didn't have to take them home and grade them. It was an exercise that took, we have 80-minute block periods at the school where I teach. It probably took us 55 minutes to do this exercise. I look at their color codes. I look at their 5-sentence that they write about themselves. And I got my grades, and I can write back to them and say, I'm in 100% accord with you. Or, hey, you overlooked one thing. This should be a learning target. I want this to be a learning target for you next time you write, you know? So it's very quick and easy.
There's another follow-up here, Brittany. When students turn in their final draft, it's fully marked up in color or lack of color, correct?
Yes.
And students turn in their essays with what they believe their grade should be?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
And I have their grades in a notepad because I already pre-read them.
Natalie asked, do you use a specific rubric for points?
I don't need a rubric because I'm using templates and heuristics. I never use a rubric unless it's my AP kids. But my Regents kids, I never use a rubric because I have heuristics. Yep. So cool. Let me show you a couple of others. Let me get back to this. Is that visible, Jake? Sometimes I don't do this right. Okay. So this is another one. Remember the game Operation when we were young? Some of us, yeah. So sometimes there's two ways to do this. Again, I need to write my exemplars and models. I need to Bob Ross this for my students. And as I'm going over my exemplars and models, so I'm going to write one perfect, and then I'm going to write one with glitches. So I'm going to say, guys, you're going to put your tweezer into your essay 3 times. And when you zap yourself based on my models and exemplars, in your margin, you're going to let me know about it. So we were doing this the other day, and Katrina said, geez, my embedded quotes are so off. I didn't do the 5-word rule, so I don't have smooth quote transitions. So in the margin of her essay, she let me know, and she let herself know that that's a learning target. She needs to work on that. They could, say anything, their sentence constructs, their vocab, not having enough support and analysis, not drawing the conclusion of their syllogism, anything in relation to the template. So if they zap themselves, I want them to find their 3 biggest professional weaknesses as writers with this. Yep, Jake.
Okay. First off, someone wants to ask about you repeating the tweezer quote.
What do you mean? You're muted. Jake, you're muted.
Sorry, can you repeat your tweezer quote is what someone's asking.
Okay, like how I do it. So the students, they're going to be looking at my models and exemplars. My first paper is scored like an A+, 100. The next paper is full of glitches. So as I'm going over my glitch paper and my stellar paper, what they'll see is comparatively where they're stacking to my samples. So as they put their tweezer into operate their on their essay, based on my models and exemplars, they might say, for example, oh, my quote transitions aren't smooth. I haven't embedded my quotes accurately enough. So I have to adhere to that 5-word rule. Or I promised to talk about the symbol of the plant, and my quotes and my paraphrase aren't aligned with that. I'm going to need to fix that. So in the margins of their paper, they're going to leave those comments for me to see, but they're also predominantly there for themselves to see as they revise, or they're grading themselves. The flip of this that we can do is they submit their essay and I only look for 3 things. I'm honing in on 3 things. Again, we're not grading the Magna Carta, right? So I just focus on 3 things and I give them 3 comments. Their 3 biggest professional weaknesses as writers, and that's it. Here's something that I always do though. I never, ever, ever tell my student a grade when I comment, because most of the kids look at the grade and they never read the comment. One thing that I do all the time with my students is, you are accountable to my comments. Read them. On my notepad, I wrote down the grade I think you deserve. Read my comments. You tell me the grade you think you deserve. They are brutally honest with themselves. You create an honor system. Yep. Jake?
Yeah, this you're leading very nicely into a question that came prior from Natalie. How do they know how do you know how many points, or they know how many points to take off? And Brittany seconded that question. And I would just follow up by saying I'm interested in that too, because it's unfortunate that we have to get into this nitty gritty. I sometimes feel like a heretic as an English teacher trying to come up with a mathematical number.
Yeah.
Say this is, and what's the difference between a 91 and a 93? You know?
Yep. So as I'm going through my exemplars, I say things like, had I done this correctly, I would score this paper a 90, but because I made this happy little accident, it's slipping down to like an 85. This paper is an A+ because it has all of this stuff. So as I'm going through the exemplars and models, I'm talking about the gradations of a 70, a 75, an 80, an 85, a 90, a 95, so that they can kind of place themselves on a template rubric. So that works well. And they're always within 5 points of me for the most part. And in fact, if we're not, it's because they're harder on themselves than I am on them. You know, Jake and I were talking about this before everyone hopped on. Jake and I went to grad school together. It seems like we're grade inflating, Jake and I know we are at my school. The C seems to have been eliminated. Like everyone gets a B- just for effort, you know? And it's, I don't know, it's kind of frustrating in many ways, but it's just kind of become a trend. I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think you and I had talked about this. I'd gone to a workshop, the Alfie Cohn, talking about grading as degrading. And he was saying that essentially what you said, if you have comments that are tied to a grade, the grade is all that matters. So if what we're talking about is helping move the students forward as writers, then and anything we can do to make the grade less central in our process is beneficial. Of course,
that's why I withhold it.
Yeah, which we also know that it ends up becoming the bottom line. But I found similarly that when I ask students to grade themselves, some can be incredibly harsh, and then a few, like your student, who are just, they're doing it hoping it's a negotiation. You know, she says
Yeah.
she has a 99. You think she has an 82. She's thinking maybe Coons will give me the 88 or something like that. But anyway,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
complicated.
Yeah. So it doesn't happen all that often, though. Here's another one that I do. I loved these books as a kid, Choose Your Own Adventure. So I don't know, some of you may never have read these as a child, but it's like, if you want to go to the moon with Samantha and hold her hand, then turn to page 118. If you want to go to the sandbox with your dog and eat dirt, turn to page 72. So you choose your own adventure, right? So prior to submitting papers, I tell my students, tell me 3 things that you want me to focus on, and I will only focus on those 3 things. And then I leave comments specifically to those 3 things. If there's like a huge, like glaring deficit in their writing, then I will bring that to their attention and say, hey, these 3 things are great that you're focusing on in your writing, but you have one thing that supersedes these 3 things, and it is this. So please make this a learning target next time you write. But that doesn't happen very often. Students need to know what they don't know. And then grades seem less arbitrary and more fair, more just, and they set their own agenda, which is really nice. And when they set their own agenda, things feel like learning. That feels like learning to me.
There's a couple more comments here. Lori said, our school has removed all plus and minus grades, straight A, B, C, D, incomplete. And then Shar wrote, unless a person is doing standards-based grading, there's inflation built into more grading practices.
Yeah.
Tina wrote, if they give themselves feedback, are they allowed to revise for a higher grade?
Yes. Yep. I always allow that. And I find that my AP students are grade motivated, and they will rewrite until they get the grade that they want. Like, a lot of them are striving for 95 to 100. And it's really great practice for AP students. I teach in a very diverse school, and our scores tend to be about 20 percentage points above the national average, I think in large part because of some of the grading practices that I've implemented along the way. So they really become good writers over an academic year. So I got a couple of others here. I love this one. I sunk your battleship. And again, maybe you remember this game as a kid. So I will read their papers, and I'm going to tell them, I'm looking for the one thing that's holding you back. Like, your biggest weakness, I'm going to identify, and I want that to be your central learning target for your revision or your next draft, your next essay. I make one big global comment. I might write a paragraph about it. And again, I withhold the grade. Like, what's the one biggest thing that is holding you back? Again, you're not grading the Magna Carta, right? You're like James Joyce's editor for the first draft of Ulysses, right? Just grading student work. And having them focus on one thing is plenty. They don't need all of our red ink. It's not serving them well. This one I love. It's called 190, 80, 70 roulette. And it kind of goes to the comment earlier about the school that has done away with the pluses and the minuses. What I'll do is take 100, a paper that I would score 100, 90, 80, and 70. And so as I'm not embarrassing anyone, I write the 70. All right, I don't want to throw anyone under the bus. And sometimes I'll write the 80 as well. I remove the names so it's anonymous. And what we do is just workshop our way through what are the differences between 100 and a 90, 100 and an 80, a 90, and a 70, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll go right through kind of like that Bob Ross rubric that we looked at. You know, what makes 100 inverted thesis? What separates the 100 inverted thesis from the 90 inverted thesis, from the 80, from the 70? And then, all right, you've seen 4 papers. Where do you stack up? Your introduction, are you headed towards 100, 90, 80, or 70? But you have to ask this question, why? Tell me in the margins why you are headed in that direction. They have to hold themselves accountable, and they have to know why. And you do that for every aspect of the rubric. You know, vocab to bees. And there's, like, as I said, there's so many other nuanced things that I just didn't have time to get into today. But you know what you're looking for in your writers. All right. Any questions on that? And then at the end, I also say grade yourself, 5 sentences, 3 learning targets.
Okay, here's a couple more questions. When withholding the grade, is that just for drafts or even for the final draft?
Final draft.
Okay.
Yep.
And then I'm sure you're going to tell us, but is your master class available in the summer? I'm getting inspired for how I can work with these concepts with my French language class. It's younger students, 6th through 8th grade, and all in French. So I'd love a summer course to wrap my head around all of it.
Yep. I'm opening the enrollment doors next week. So trying to figure out how to use Calendly. I got to talk to my web designer about that, but I'm going to do June, July, and August. And what I do is we have found Sunday nights to be the best time to meet. So I'm on the East Coast, so Eastern Standard Time. We have a session from 5 to 6 and then 7 to 8 on Sunday evenings. If there's more demand and if we can kind of broker a time that works, maybe we'll do like a Wednesday night from 8 to 9, depending on interest. I'm assuming there's going to be a lot of people interested during the summer, but I'm going to run the next class, I think the second Sunday of June, which is the 13th, if I recall. So I already have people in that slide, but I think there's like 3 more seats available for that. It's going to be a good blend of people, because I have a couple of middle school teachers in there, all the way to teachers that do international baccalaureate. So it's going to be pretty interesting to see that. And in the masterclass, I mean, we've thoroughly unpacked the heuristics, and there are some for your younger kids as well, because they will not, some of your emerging struggling writers at the 8th and 9th grade won't grasp the syllogistic method. So there's an abridged version that I call the literary sandwich. And that's just a further scaffold to get them towards writing syllogistically. So we go over that as well.
So you have a bunch of questions here, Kristian. So you have a self-paced class, correct?
Yes.
And then what's the difference in the content between the master class and the self-paced class?
Self-paced is everything that the master class offers. You just take it as at your own leisure. So every single skill set and concept of the master class is in that self-paced course. But here's the thing, a lot of the self-paced students have questions, and I'm on Zoom with them often. I'm like, let's just get on Zoom and we'll unpack it. I'll show you what I mean. So it ends up becoming kind of a quasi masterclass anyway. So it's totally cool. So I don't mind.
You have a direct question about, can you speak to what's included with your offerings?
Yes, I'll get to that at the end. So here's my last one. Some teachers are so wedded to the idea of traditional grading. They're just like, I have to, my students expect it of me. Don't give them grade. Don't give them a grade. If you feel like you have to give comments like you're accustomed to doing, withhold the grade, because they have to be held accountable to your feedback. Otherwise, most of them won't even read it. They won't internalize it, and there won't be transference to the next draft. So sometimes, like early in the academic year, with the first papers, I feel I have to go to the traditional route just because that's what they're indoctrinated to do. And I yeah, do that, but withhold the grade.
There's another question about from Brittany. I don't mean to get stuck on the numbers game, but do you ever show them the grade you gave?
Always. Yep, always. So I'll say, you know, I gave you a 91 and you went an 88. So we're on the same page here. So just a little slightly off. It's so, dude, as you know, grading's subjective. And like, what's the difference between a 91 and a 93? Who the hell knows? So, you know, it's so ridiculous. I'm on the Alfie Cohn page. Like I'm hoping we get away from grades at some point in time and just do a holistic score at the end of the quarter.
Jen asks, is there a deadline to finish the self-paced class? I started, but school got hectic and I haven't finished. I plan to start once we're out for the summer.
Nope, you can go at your own pace. The masterclass library is you have lifetime access to. So let me show that. I think I got to end my recording if I go off screen here. So let me figure this out. Give me 1 second. I think I got to minimize you guys. You cannot minimize Zoom when you are recording this meeting. Okay, so I have to stop recording. Let me do that. And I hope that will automatically convert, right? Yes.
I think if you hit the up in the top right corner, you have the X and you have the 2 little pieces of paper and then the line that minimizes it. You can't minimize it, but that middle button, if you click that, it reduces the size and then you can kind of pull it over to the size and pull it over to the side of your screen and then you can get to your other tabs.
That's
Thank
awesome.
you, COVID,
Thank
for me knowing that.
Yeah, we use Google Classroom. So all right. So let me blow you guys up again. And then, all right. So this is my masterclass webpage. So it's teachinghowtowrite.com. teachinghowtowrite.com. So you have an intensive course, which is one-on-one. A lot of rookie teachers do that with me, but I've had some veteran teachers take that with me as well. So that's one-to-one. That's a lot of fun. I really like working one-to-one with people and seeing the light bulbs and the eureka moments. There's the master class, which is the 4-to-1, which is running on Sundays. There's the self-paced course. And then one of the things that is new, and I need my web designer to fix this, she just was tweaking the web page yesterday, is a lot of teachers are just interested in the alternative grading practices. And so we're going to offer a package where you still will workshop with me. I'll take you through all 25, but it's only a 1-class session. It'll probably take us, I don't know, I've never run it before. So I'm assuming it would probably take us like 2 hours, maybe an hour and a half. And I would show you all the grading practices, but then you would have access to the self-paced course and the masterclass library, because you do need to know how to manipulate the heuristics and the templates in order to do the alternative grading. So I think that's going to be really popular this summer. And I don't know why she called it the Great Library. It is Great Library, but it's just called the Masterclass Library. And it's not letting me, oh, it's downloading. So this is the sweet spot right here. There are, I liken it to this. So my instructional videos are like closely akin to watching Bob Ross. So let's say that you're teaching 1984 and you get to the essay portion. There are videos for I have the 65 plus most commonly taught novels and plays in the American high school curriculum. So each video is about a half hour long, and it's me painting with you and your students through the essay. So you can watch it yourself and say, cool, I'm going to take these ideas and use them for my students. Or you just pop in the video for your students and hit pause, where the pauses are, and have them write, and then you workshop it with them. So look, Jake, is this visible?
Yes.
Okay. So look at the title of all the text I have. And I add to this every week. So this week I did Pygmalion. Somebody wanted that. Somebody was teaching Beloved, so I got to record that. And what was the other one I did? I don't remember what it was. Oh, Monster. Somebody was doing Monster. I'd never read that before. So an 8th grade teacher. But you can see there, that's loaded. That's chock full of stuff. So there are 150 plus of those. So there's categories for synthesis. Let me see if I can get to.
While you're doing that, Kristian,
Yeah.
Shar asked, is the alternative guide package included in the masterclass?
Yeah, yep. So we do go over alternative grading in the master class. Let's go here. So this is kind of what the master class has. So there's an introductory day where we do the Nuance Academy. I go over the literary sandwich, and then the heuristics are applicable across expository modes. So we do literary analysis, which is just all the text I just showed you, the 65. We do rhetorical analysis, argument, persuasion, argumentative synthesis. The Tricks of the Trade folder has a lot of those nuance games that I was showing you. I showed you a couple, like the Bob Ross rubrics, all of that stuff. There's a poetry folder. I have advanced placement language and literature, videos going back to 2015 to the present, and then the alternative grading. So that's the masterclass library, and you have lifetime access to that. I add to it all the time. And that's what teachers are really loving. So I asked participants from my last masterclass to write me some reviews, and somebody left a killer review for me, and they were like, shh, don't tell anyone. But since I took Kristian's masterclass in January, I've not made a lesson plan since. I mean, literally your lesson planning is like done for you as far as the writing goes. And it's good. Like it's just the heuristics and templates, and it's just me painting with you and your kids through the essays. So like all you have to do is probably what you love doing is teaching literature, and then I teach the writing. So every single video has an editable PowerPoint template. So you can just like what I advise teachers in my masterclass to do is you have my exemplars and models. So there'll be like 3 inverted theses, 2 declarative theses. You write your own as well. Give your students a ton of examples. Say Kristian wrote these, I wrote these. Kristian wrote these 2 syllogisms. This is my syllogism. The more exemplars and models you give, the clearer the instruction, the more the writing component is demystified. It's pretty cool. So yeah, so I'm going to open things up for June 13th, and then I'll get my July sections going. Here is the website if you want to write that down, teachinghowtowrite.com. So Yep, that's the direction we're going for the summer. So the other thing too is I was telling Jake this. I've been in contact with the National Writing Project, and looks like they want to hire me as a writing instructor, but they're swamped this summer. I guess they're doing a bunch of grant writing and things, and they're not going to be offering as many courses. But it looks like for those that need professional development through accredited institutions, I will get that stamp of approval probably in August, it's looking like. That's my understanding from the director, but there's like, if you need it for professional development, schools are honoring this as a professional development opportunity. So a lot of teachers do it for PD because they need it for their certifications. Cool. Anything else, Jake? You muted yourself again.
I have a question that you have already answered, but I'm still a little confused. I understand how to declare a thesis, but what does it mean to invert the thesis? Are the books written forms of the workshops?
I don't know what you mean by books written forms of the workshop.
Are the books written forms of the workshops? That's the question.
Yeah, I don't quite know. Like the books, like the plays and the novels, are the workshops themselves. So like, let's say,
the books you wrote, she's saying.
Oh, they're all available. Yeah, there's a textbook that comes with every package. So I wrote a textbook that has my templates, my heuristics, my nuance academy, my word study.
She's asking if your books mirror the style of your workshops and what you cover.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And that other question was more specific about what you mean about inverting the thesis.
So when you invert, you start with context and background. So sometimes teachers will tell their students to start with a hook or an analogy, which doesn't always work. Like sometimes for argument or synthesis, you would start with a hook or an analogy, but not with rhetorical analysis or literary analysis. There's no need to start with a hook. So you start with the context and background, and as you funnel it down towards the fourth sentence, you drop the thesis at the bottom. Declare, you start with the thesis and then you broaden out with the context and background. So it's just a matter of where the thesis goes, up top or at the bottom.
See, so you have here, this was an amazing introduction. I have to sign out now, but I will contact you to see about a course, likely the self-paced due to my time issues. Thank you. And then
Yep, you're welcome.
Natalie says, can we contact you if we do the self-pace? Jen says, thank you so much for this.
Yes, absolutely. I'm always available. Yep.
Good.
All right. Well, enjoy your Saturdays, everyone. If there's no other questions, I'll stay on until the last person signs off. But great having you. And I hope you take something away from the workshop. At least don't grade so much today. Try an alternative, you know? So, all right. Goodbye, everyone. Jake, you were a powerhouse, man.
Well, I was wondering if you had, if it would be easier for you to have people just ask directly. I didn't know.
Oh, to unmute themselves?
Yeah. Maybe not.
If we probably could have today because there were only like 15 people, but usually there's like 100 people on, and that gets a little unwieldy. So like I did this same workshop Wednesday night and it was packed. So
this is great because I'm sitting here looking at this and two things. One is I'm just about to start grading Great Gatsby essays.
Yeah.
They've written a rough draft for Monday. So now I'm actually going to work through the process. Again, you knew this. I was on sabbatical in the fall, so never had a chance to really introduce anything with my kids. It's kind of stepping in. It's been very disconcerting after years of teaching to be like, okay, well, now I have to reestablish some things, whatever. So I'm going to spend some time really on the process next week, and then we're going into a Raisin in the Sun. So.
Oh, cool. I'll share my stuff with you. So. Yep.
Wow.
Instant message me. I'll send you everything, and I'll give you access to all of this stuff too.
Thank
So
you very
I'll
much.
just create like a hack account for you.
Thank
So
you.
get the old Brown perspective. Oh, go ahead, Lori.
I have a quick question. So, our school is very rubric oriented. It's very, I find it very restrictive in some ways. This just makes so much more sense to me. And I have a teacher that I partner with for sophomores this is his first year. He came from Colorado to Oregon, and he comes from your philosophy. His experience is what you're doing. And so we've been talking, and I'm like, that makes so much more sense. But I just keep feeling like it's just going to be a matter of time where we get called out. I also partner with 2 others teaching juniors, and they are very strict rubric. They bow to the rubric.
Yep.
How do you work within a department and a school?
Yeah, I've done it many, many, many times. So I'm working with this district in North Dakota right now. Their director's like, we need rubrics, and they have something called what's it called? E-Doctrina, where every time they grade an essay, they have an electronic form that they have to fill out, which is a rubric. And then the students get like an electronic score, and their parents get an electronic score. So basically what we did was, usually my course takes 5 days, but since they're a district, we're working 10 days together. And probably the last 3 days, we took my heuristics and templates and just made rubrics across expository modes. So there's a rubric for lit analysis, and then you make it specific to the text with just some super small tweaking. So that's easy to do. So it really takes no time at all. And so if you guys wanted to work with me and take one of the courses, we could spend as much time as you guys need to get the rubrics in place.
And you meet once a week?
Yes.
I love the idea of the self-paced, but I also like the idea of structure and get her done and collaborating and talking.
Yeah, it's like if you're going to be working with colleagues, the master class is probably the way to go. I've done that a lot, like a ton with departments, and it's a great way to vertically align. So I've done vertical alignment with districts, and it's really, really effective.
Okay. Well, I sure appreciate it. This is great. I will definitely be jumping on board this summer.
Okay, perfect.
I just
Thanks,
want to
Lori.
reiterate one thing. You are doing a master class starting on June 13th. That is, I'm leaving town and some variety of things, but you will be offering July?
Yes. Yep.
Okay,
And we're gonna have a couple of weeks off because July 4th I'm going away, and then one of the 20s, in the July 20s, I'm also going away. So there's going to be a couple of breaks in the July session, but July and August. Yep.
Okay. And they're 5 weeks long?
Yes.
Okay. And they're 1 hour long?
Yes.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Have a
All
great
right. Take
weekend.
care.